people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to challenge. They're afraid to have a healthy dialogue, admit mistakes, try something new. They don't want to be embarrassed or called out. Hi, this is Diane Scott, and welcome to the Best Boss Podcast. I have one of my most requested content that I'm going to go over today. From my 22 years of coaching, many times I'm called to deal with something called a disruptive employee. So the title of this podcast is Dealing with Disruptive Employees. We're going to talk about the causes, we're going to talk about the consequences, and we're going to touch on the solutions. Initially, I set out to make this a one-size-fits-all podcast, but I actually think that the solutions are important enough to have on a part two. So keep in tune for part two. Before we begin, when I see disruptive employees, I often hear the statement when somebody calls me for one, they'll say, he's a good engineer, but he's a good auditor, but she's a good physician. But what follows the but often is some sort of disruptive behavior or communication style or a leadership style that just doesn't fit well with the company culture. And when I'm called to help out this person, I really have to flesh out exactly what they're talking about disruptive. And I think it behooves us to really talk about what is a disruptive employee. Disruptive employees are not people who challenge the status quo. They're not trying to get the company better. They're not trying to challenge ideas or direction or speak up. That's not a disruptive employee. What a disruptive employee does is it damages the team dynamics. It damages the company culture dynamics. It's often done in a means of authority over somebody else. The power base is unequal, even if the positions are equal. And most importantly, it undermines something called psychological safety. That is a term that I'm hearing almost every single day when I'm coaching now. So let's talk about what psychological safety is. It's a culture and an environment, and it's a shared belief where people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to challenge. They're afraid to have a healthy dialogue, admit mistakes, try something new. They don't want to be embarrassed or called out. Psychological safety is undermined by a disruptive employee when they do something like they dominate a conversation or they dismiss or belittle another person, often routinely. It's sometimes it's acting aggressively, but not always. And sometimes it's unpredictable, but not always. They don't just cause the tension here. They shut down the feelings from others that are others with safety. I have seen it happen where an employee does it to a boss. I've actually seen quite a few times where that happens. So what happens when psychological safety disappears? What happens, quite frankly, is people shut down. They go quiet. They're afraid to even bring it up. If they bring it up, they don't think anything's going to happen. I had a incident where I had a boss in my past life who was very disruptive, very big into bullying, but I was really young. I didn't think that anything would happen as a result. I never said a word to a person. Some of the things that she did was she would belittle people in front of a crowd. She would point out your mistakes whenever you were with more than one person. She would almost make fun in a sarcastic way of other team members to the point where you were never going to be the one that challenged her or talked with her or even had a dialogue with her. You just would hope that she wasn't going to call you out on it. I'm not proud of this, but I see this in multiple situations. What I did is I left. I thought that I could handle any boss. She did not hire me, somebody before her did. And I inherited her as a boss and she inherited me. And I didn't feel at that time, we didn't use the word psychological safety. I just went and slithered off because I didn't want to ever address the behavior with anybody. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have the mechanism in my brain. Or I didn't have the emotional intelligence to be able to bring things up in a professional manner. Now that was many years ago before the terms disruptive or bullying were in the workplace, but you get the idea. The number one reason people leave their jobs is their immediate supervisor. That has not changed since COVID. But when we talk about psychological safety, you're going to hold back. You're never going to take risk. You'll check out mentally from the room, even if you don't check out physically in the room. I have a team coaching incident, all on Zoom, by the way. Very intelligent master's and doctoral prepared leaders, leaders of pretty significant sections of an organization. Out of 9 people, there was one person who undermines the entire dynamics of the group. She will bring up occurrences that are hard to argue or facts that are hard to argue. When a disruptive person brings up an example of why they're disruptive, they often have it rooted in something very concrete, very objective, that it's hard to argue. So it's not about their behavior, it's what they're talking about, and they led you into a rabbit hole. When she's on Zoom, I watch 9 very strong people go mute. They won't say a word. Perhaps some of them have told me that they have argued with her before. There's no point. Other people said that they talked to her boss about her before with no avail. She completely undermines the culture of what is going on there. And she has an incredible power dynamic of that group. Now, this is a group of peers. So it's not necessarily somebody that's in a higher authority, although it often is. But all these things make people unhappy at work. They don't want to be at work. They're not engaged with work. And it takes just one. So the tricky part is, you think disruptive is a loud person, somebody that comes into an area and is loud and aggressive, but it actually most often isn't loud. It's passive aggressive, either verbally or written. Their eye rolls in meetings, or they withdraw from a conversation. This particular person that was on Zoom during team coaching, one session I had, she completely was quiet and just sat there like this. And it was so obvious and so apparent. It destroyed the interpersonal dynamics and any progress that we were making just with her intentional disruption by not saying a word. She was not going to participate. The meeting before, she was really verbal and she just shut down. It was incredible. And now my least favorite way that you can be sarcastic, a word about sarcasm. There was a study done about 15 years ago about sarcasm in the United States. And it stated that 85% of people in the United States dislike sarcastic people and like sarcasm, especially in the workplace. I am very sarcastic. My family is sarcastic. I didn't even know that was an issue. And when I read the study, I was so surprised how many people strongly dislike it. Now, it's even worse when you get 2 people in a room that are sarcastic and a third person in the room who is not. That person will always feel left out. They feel like they're not part of the club. So what do you do with sarcasm? You stop it. And from somebody who was born and raised with sarcasm, that's really hard because we're just trying to be funny, but other people find it very disruptive. So if you're a sarcastic person, the only thing to do is stop it. People also are talking about disruptive, like, is this person disruptive or are they having a bad day? It really is, it's a period of time. It's not a moment in time. Everybody can have a bad day, but is trust built around them? Here's the other thing that's really wicked interesting is sometimes they're really good at what they do. And so that also gives them a power over a situation or power over a group of people. When somebody is disruptive over a period of time, the end results can be pretty significant. People can leave. People can stop feedback. They disengage. Nothing's ever going to happen. There's no innovation. And actually, it's kind of hard to believe that it might be because of one person's behavior. It may not be glaringly obvious, But if you really root down as a leader and try to figure out what the heck is happening, sadly, it's because of the power that a person has that is disruptive, that really takes over an entire culture of a department or an organization. So let's go a little bit deeper as to why it happens. I get called often for disruptive employees. I'm a coach that does it. I've done it for a long time. And there's reason they're worth it. And this is important because most people would say, if you have a disruptive person, why not just cut your losses, have them go on their way and end the disruption? There's actually multiple reasons why that's not always the first step. It may be the step, but it shouldn't be the first step. And let me tell you why. First of all, people who are disruptive, let's be honest, sometimes they're really good bringers in of outcomes, revenue, leadership, experience, sales, marketing. They might be a physician who is huge, that brings in a huge amount of income. They often are brilliant problem solvers. They can be very committed to the mission. And sometimes they use that as a reason for their behavior. So they'll often catch something that other people miss. And they have this, often will have like a value system that's tied into why they're acting so disruptive. But if you redirect their energy, they can be some of your greatest assets. I have seen more often than not, it's a bold statement, but it's true, disruptive behaviors, when addressed properly, can not only change the life of them, of the employee, it can also change the way that your culture is viewed. See, if you don't deal with a disruptive employee in a visual, obvious way, it becomes part of the culture. The other thing is, if you fire somebody who has a talent or brings in something significant, people also start to get a little worried that they are next. There's a lot of reasons not to, you got to give them a chance. You got to give them the ability to change. I don't think that most people that are disruptive are trying to be that way. They often have a massive tie into standards and fairness and what they think is right. They have a value system that overtakes the need or desire to be kind to others. And it's an intensity. It's just not communicated in a way that other people can receive it. And coaching, which is what I do for a disruptive employee, it's actually not about them. It's about your culture. When you show your team, even outside the disruptive employee, that feedback can lead to growth, not X out, you start to rebuild some psychological safety that may not have been there, or may have been eroded over time. If you don't, you can't not address it, because if you don't address it, everybody suffers or they'll quietly quit. A lot of people will just keep their head down, not say a word, especially if the person is one of that of authority. I mean, we can always use the reason to deal with disruptive employees because replacing employees is expensive and it's tricky. That is true. And there might come a point where you've tried everything, you've tried coaching, you've tried addressing it in different ways. It doesn't fix. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it can't be the first thing that happened. The biggest problem with me coaching disruptive employees is that people come to me when it's really too late. Massive damage is done. PIPs have occurred. They're on their last chance. Catch it early and you have a better chance of fixing it. Change is possible. It is possible. And I can even argue that change is probable if handled in the right way. And I don't mean a one-off, short, sustainable, don't yell anymore type of conversation. It's really flushing out the root of why a person acts the way they do and getting them to make conscious decisions of ownership and then deciding to change and then repairing the damage, which we're going to talk about in part 2 of this video. Yeah, it's a commitment to get the disruptive employee to change. It's almost always worth it. I've seen transformation happen. I've seen the highest potential unlock. I've seen massive, great, positive, game-changing programs and strategies be potentiated because you've dealt with this disruption and redirected it into growth. And I've seen the disruptive employees, some of which have been on my podcast, turn into actually champions of culture. They can become your greatest champion. It's really worth it. Now, I'm going to say something that's controversial. It's important to know that when you're dealing with somebody that's disruptive, yes, a lot of things are put on leaders to fix disruptive people. But I'm going to be honest with you. This is something you set as an employer or a boss. You set the standards for the code of conduct, for the way people behave. The employee owns their behavior. If you tell them just a cease and assist, which most people do, you know, something very disruptive, you can't act that way anymore. They own it. You do not. Coaching is a way to handle it because it is not just a short one-off and when their buttons are pushed that they have to recall. It's very important that the person who's being disruptive owns it. And they own it because it's not the reason why they're acting is because something else is wrong. They own their behavior because it's singular into itself. Those other things can be wrong, but you don't have to act that way. So it's important to they understand what's driving it. It's not important for you to diagnose it. So understand that. It's up to them to change. It's up to you to provide the psychological safety for the company, but it's up to them to change. Give them the tools. They're on their own. They own it. And it's really not a blaming them. It's an empowering them to find a way to do it better. Now, this is a little bit of background about disruptive employees. I know them well. Every day I coach a disruptive employee or several. They're worth it. Your company's worth it. You're worth it. Address it early, address it often. And in my next video, I'm going to tell you some of the steps on how to do it. I'm Diane Scott. This is the Best Boss Podcast, and thank you for listening.